It's been a few months since Star Trek Discovery Season 2 finished, so I thought it would be a good time now to maybe look back, reflect, decide what my rankings are of the episode, which episodes I thought were best out of the season and which episodes really weren't and were at the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do on today's video.
Right then. Hit it.
Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture things I like, including Star Trek. Today, as I already said, I'm going to be ranking all the episodes from Star Trek Discovery Season 2, from the very worst through to the highlights of the season. I don't want to beat around the bush with this. I just want to get straight into it because it's hot. I'm recording this on what has been the hottest weekend of the year here in the UK. So it's 20 past 9 at night and I am still really hot. We don't have aircon in the UK, really, in our houses. So we just have to make do with fans. This is all I've got to keep me cold. My biggest fan. Anyway, let's get on with it. At bottom place, number 14 on this ranking is Point of Light. The Klingon storyline of Star Trek Discovery, right from the very beginning, throughout both seasons, has been its weakest part. I was so relieved in season 1 when they kind of moved away from it and went into the Mirror Universe plot. That greatly improved the season on season 1. And it continues to be the weakest part of the show in season 2 as well. It didn't really come up much. It felt like they were just sort of tying up loose ends. But this episode just felt so just disconnected from what was going on with the rest of the Discovery storyline. It just felt like it just been plonked in there to wrap up stuff because what they planned to do with the show had changed. And I don't know, it just felt very tedious. Not that there weren't some interesting, but it was quite nice, the reveal of the D7 battle cruiser. You know, they were clearly trying to also, with this episode, right some wrongs with the Klingons. They massively misstepped with the Klingons in this show. And you can see them here start to address some of those issues. You know, oh look, they've started growing hair again. And they're introducing ships that we know what they look like again, rather than these bizarre things. So that, you know, it felt like they were just trying to... This episode, they felt like they needed to do it, but it wasn't a very good episode. It was disjointed. The Discovery segments of it didn't really match up with the Klingon segments of it. Even there wasn't really any... Didn't even match up well thematically. So yeah, this episode definitely was a very big low point in the season. At number 13, we have Saints of Imperfection. This is the episode where they rescued Tilly from the Mycenial Network, and this might have been a bit higher had they actually bothered to go on and, you know, develop any of the ideas they brought up in it. We got this whole thing about the spore drive in this episode being damaging to the Mycenial Network, and that it felt like they were putting that in there to maybe give an excuse why the spore drive would stop being used. But then later on in the season, they continue to use it and they don't even mention this stuff. So the repercussions of this episode seem like they were just abandoned, and this whole storyline with May and Tilly and the spore creatures just seems to have been completely abandoned after this episode. And I think this was another one of those plots that suffered from the change in behind the scenes people when the new people came in, when Alex Kurtzman came in, has decided that doesn't really want this plot line, but it'd gone so far it had to be wrapped up. So again, it kind of felt very much like it was just there because it had to be, and the people behind it didn't really want it to be. Does that make sense? The character of May had been annoying me from the very first episode she was in. This spore creature, we didn't know she was a spore creature that when she was first introduced. I just found her annoying. She got less annoying, and this is the episode she was least annoying in out of all of them, but she was still a little bit annoying. There was some good stuff by Tilly, but overall, I don't know. You also had the whole Spock plotline, which by this point I felt was starting to drag out a little bit, and they needed to get a move on with it by this point. Thankfully they did fairly soon after this, I believe, but but at this point it was just dragging out. However, credit where it's due, I will give this episode some props for bringing Georgiou back. I really enjoy her character. I think the actress is phenomenal, and I enjoy seeing any scene really with Empress Georgiou in, because she just has this presence that is really interesting to watch, and I love that character. So, props to it for giving her back, but overall it's still quite a weak episode. In 12th place, I put Through the Valley of Shadows, which again is the only other real Klingon episode that again felt like it was tying up some loose ends. Kind of felt like they just mashed two plots that they had together. It kind of felt like they had the plot of the episode they needed, but they kind of wanted to mash the Klingon stuff, which didn't feel like it really fitted, onto it just to wrap up some more things. Because in the previous Klingon episode we've already mentioned, there's this child that is Vok and I've forgotten her name, L'Rell? Child, and they send him off to a monastery. Here, due to the magic of time crystals, he has grown up and is a fully grown man. It just felt like it was very out of place, and it felt like it was just a Klingon story because they wanted to get some more stuff for the Klingons out the way so they don't have to deal with it anymore. The Guardians of the Time Crystals could have been any race at all, and that would have been better, in fact, than having the Klingons. The Klingons just felt mashed in there for no reason at all. And then you got the Time Crystals themselves. The way they work in this episode and in the series in general is they're like magic crystals. They don't feel scientific, and yes, that's true. I mean, occasionally Trek does this. You got the Q, they feel very magic. But, I don't know, there's something about the time crystals and the way they've been used in this series that just feels like it belongs in a fantasy series rather than a science fiction series. So, that whole time crystal plotline is massively weak, and I don't particularly like this episode because of it. However, there was one absolutely outstanding scene and some brilliant stuff in general from Anson Mount as Pike. Pike is the standout of season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, no doubt. And here, he actually gets a really good scene. The time crystals, with their magic, manage to give him a vision of what is in store for him in the future. Him ending up in the wheelchair, mutilated, not being able to speak. And he sees that happen. He sees a vision of that happening. And it's a really powerful scene. And I think he acts it superbly. So that one scene is why this episode isn't lower down. If it wasn't for that, and it wasn't for Anson Mount's acting, because I think he does a brilliant job throughout this episode with what he's given, this episode would be probably at least one space lower. But because of that, it gets up here. In 11th place, I've got Light and Shadow. This is the episode where Burnham goes and finds Spock on Vulcan. And I quite like, throughout the latter part of the season, the dynamic between Spock and Burnham. I think they work quite well together. And here you see some of that start to happen. But, so the stuff on Vulcan is alright, but with their plotline, I think the Section 31 stuff is quite weak. So altogether, that plotline of Burnham finding Spock is kind of like it's not terrible, but it's not great yet. There's some stuff later on in the season between the two of them that is really good. This isn't it yet, unfortunately. This is hints of it, but it's not there. Now, what is good in this episode, and again, it's down to Pike, because that stuff with Pike and Tyler on the ship, on the shuttle, as they encounter for the first time Control, that is good stuff. I really like that, and it felt like a natural way for their arrive, because they'd been butting heads the last couple of episodes since Tyler had come on board the ship, and it felt like a good and natural way for them to gain a bit of respect for each other. It felt real, and it was played brilliantly by both actors. So again, this is a Pike moment that has sort of saved this episode from being lower, because I think that stuff worked really well. So 10, I put Red Angel in 10th place. We got some good stuff in this with Burnham finding out about Section 31's involvement with her parents' death, I thought we got some good shades of grey being introduced with Leyland, which again, they kind of spoil in the next episode. A lot of the stuff, it's just a bit of a reoccurring theme I'm realising as I'm making this video, that they introduce something I really like in an episode, and I give that episode praise for it, but they kind of ruin it a few episodes later. So here, Leyland was actually given some, they were developing him a bit, and that, he felt a bit of guilt about what had happened to her parents. He wasn't an out-and-out mustache-twirling villain, which earlier on in the season we might have thought maybe he could have been. And after this, they turned him into a mustache-twirling villain because he got taken over by Control. And I really felt that they were going to go somewhere with this character. And that's why I'm giving it credit in this episode, because in this episode, they give him that extra stuff, and it's quite nice. This is also the episode where we find out her mum is alive and has been in the future and has been in the Red Angel costume. So quite an exciting development, I thought, with this. And I was quite glad that at this point, that it wasn't anybody we knew from the ship. It wasn't Spock. It wasn't Burnham. It wasn't anything like that at this point. Again, later. But I forgave this one later. But it was quite a nice discovery, that as well. So I quite liked that twist. Number 9, we've got the episode that immediately follows that, Perpetual Infinity. Good episode, I think. I liked what they were doing with trying to work out what to do with the sphere data and how they would get rid of it. That was all quite interesting stuff, and you had some good old-fashioned sort of theorizing and discussions around the engineering tables and all that sort of stuff, trying to work out what to do. Good old-fashioned Star Trek stuff there. That was quite good. The bad was, as I mentioned before, Leland being taken over by Control, which just kind of stopped his character development. And I don't know, I kind of get why they did him getting taken over, but I don't know, maybe if they could have left it a bit later, or developed his character a bit more beforehand, that would have been good. It just kind of turned him into a mustache-twirling villain, a superpowered mustache-twirling villain, and the character lost all interest for me at that point. And number 8, we've got Such Sweet Sorrow Part 2. This is the more action-packed part of the 2-part season finale, and there was less character development in it. I quite liked the character development in the first part, and I kind of like the way they split the two up, and they did all the character stuff in the first part so that they could leave all the big action to the second part. It kind of made sense here, I think. It was, however, a bit of a disappointing ending to the Control story arc, which I kind of felt just fizzled out a little bit. But there was still a lot of good stuff in there as well. The dynamic between Spock and Burnham I have loved throughout most of the second part of this season, and it's really strong in this episode. Slightly stronger in part 1, which we'll come to in a minute, but it was still really good here. They were sort of two of the characters that actually continued to get development into this episode as well. There were some brilliant visuals, the whole way the jumping through time was visualized on screen, and the 2D plane coming around, and I can't really describe it very well, but that worked fantastically and looked amazing. All of the battle and action in terms of the look of it looked amazing. So there was really a lot of good stuff here, and I think an exciting end to the future. Oh yeah, and of course the Enterprise. Loved the Enterprise, and we got to see that in part 1 as well, but also I thought that looked brilliant, and it was really good to see it be more... Yeah, it had a visual update, but it was more in keeping with the original than Discovery was for the same sort of era. So yeah, all that's very good indeed. Yeah, and I can't think of anything really negative to say about this. It's just kind of... there was some good stuff in there. Maybe they could have done some more character development in this part. Which brings me to part 1, which is next on the list, next highest up, because part 1 had all that kind of character development, and character development for a lot of characters which were not major players as well. We got to see all those letters home to people, those messages home from various crew members to their loved ones because they thought they might not be coming back. That was lovely as well. This is where we got to see the Enterprise for the first time, the inside of it properly, which the bridge is fantastic. Love it. Absolutely brilliant. And you got to feel this real sort of tension ramping up, and yeah, I think it was a solid enough episode. Not an absolutely amazing season finale, these 2 parts, but, you know, solid enough. That's why they're coming sort of in the middle of the list. Next up in position 6, we've got Project Daedalus, and this is their all down to Arium, because I thought there was great development of her character. I loved the kind of flashbacks that we got, her downloading her memories and seeing her memories, so getting a hint at the human behind the machine that had been there before she got all the implants, before she'd had her accident. We got to find out that backstory of the accident. That was all lovely stuff for developing our character. I only wish that we had it earlier, because I think I said this in my review. It was really powerful at the end of this episode, and I'll come to that in a minute. But it would have been so much more powerful if we had had this proper development for the character throughout the first season and a half. We'd only really, you know, she'd been kind of a background character for a lot of it, with the occasional line here and there. It was, and this season she got a little bit more, but it was only really once she got taken over by Control that we really got to see stuff from her. In this episode, we got everything all at once. It's a shame we didn't get to see more, but what we did see here was great, and commend the actress here. And that whole scene with where she struggles and tries to regain control of her own body, and tries to blows us, and somebody blows her out of an airlock. All of that stuff was so powerful, and I thought it was really good. And credit to everyone involved, you know, the cinematographer, the actors, everyone, you know, the people that did the music, because that was a key component of it as well. That whole scene, just everything came together perfectly to, you know, draw on my heartstrings, even though we hadn't had that proper development for her. So absolutely credit where it's due there, and that is why this episode is so high. Number 5, I put Brother. It's a decent enough first episode, and I thought it did a relatively good job of readjusting after season 1's very dark tone, adding in little bits of humour, just sort of going, hey, we're going to be a slightly different from season 1 here in terms of our tone and things. So, you know, laying its foundations out there. And it was, you know, a fairly average but enjoyable enough episode. Now, where it really stands out is the introduction of Pike, because as I've mentioned elsewhere on this list, he is absolutely the standout character for this season of Star Trek. Absolutely amazing, and there's you know, you can absolutely see why so many people are calling for him to get his own series, because he's got that charisma, he's got the way he's written, the way he performs it, Anson Mount performs it, everything just comes together, and he is that breath of fresh air that the series really needed. And yeah, he's the reason this episode is so high, because he just absolutely makes this, and all of his interactions with all of the crew, every scene he's in, it just brightens the place up, I think. And yeah, it was nice and refreshing after. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mind Lorca. I don't hate him as much as some people seem to. I thought it was an interesting storyline with Lorca, but like I say, this was a nice breath of fresh air. Number 4, The Sound of Thunder. Saru's home planet. We return to it. We get some great stuff with Saru. Saru, for season 1, was my favourite character. For season 2, he's been slightly nudged out of that by Pike, but he's still my second favourite character. And I think there's just some brilliant acting here by him, some brilliant, some brilliant moral conundrums that come up that Star Trek's really good with dealing with, and just it was great seeing that backstory. And yeah, I thought it was an interesting episode. There were some slight, if I had any criticisms of it, just the kind of the way it was kind of brushed under towards the end of the episode of what was going to happen next. Starfleet especially just seemed to be like, okay, that's done, never mind, we're going to go now. But other than that, it was a really good episode. It was a really powerful episode, and yeah, good. If Memory Serves is the episode I put in third place, and Telos 4. I mean, what more do I need to say? As someone who has watched all of the original series and really enjoyed it, and watched, the cage and the menagerie and all that, I really liked seeing this done really well. Slightly reimagined in terms of their design, but not too much. It's how you take something from the classic series and update it well. And you got some brilliant stuff from Spock and Burnham as well. So all in all, this was a really good episode. In second place, I put an O-Ball for Sharon, which is the other Saru-focused episode, really. This is where he's losing his ganglia. He thinks he's going to die. Instead, he evolves. It's really amazing acting by Doug Jones. As I said, Saru is my second favourite character in the show, behind Pike. He's just brilliant. He needs to be captain of the Discovery. And Doug Jones just does a fantastic job here. There's real emotion throughout the whole episode. There's touching, when he thinks he's going to die, when he's begging Burnham to cut off his ganglia, effectively euthanize him. That was all really powerful stuff. If I had any major negatives about it, the only one that really springs to mind now is the fact that the relationship between Burnham and Saru didn't feel earned. That they'd been adversaries in season 1, and it kind of felt like this early in season 2 especially, we hadn't seen it. Yeah, they may have, had time off screen, but we hadn't seen them come to a point where, at one point, I can't remember who refers to, whether or not it's Burnham or Saru, but refers to them as like brother and sister. And I haven't seen that get to that point from being adversaries on the screen. So it kind of felt a little bit unearned there. But that doesn't negate the fact that there's lots of powerful stuff in the episode, some brilliant acting from Saru, and I think it also produced some interesting things for his character going forward, which we saw develop throughout the series in terms of his increased presence and increased, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of gung-ho attitude and lack of fear, slightly aggressiveness in some places, but it was all really interesting to see and how they developed that from this point on. And so at number 1, my favourite episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 2 was New Eden, the second episode of the season. This really felt like a classic Star Trek episode. It was an away mission. There was this whole moral quandary that they had to deal with of what's the right thing to do, and both sides of it were explored and discussed, and there was some great character stuff from Burnham and from Pike again. Pike is again brilliant in this episode. All the guests, some of the guest cast even, are brilliant in this as well. And it also sort of starts to develop the ongoing plot arc, the Red Angel mystery, a bit more, and we get hints of that threaded through this as well, so it's a nice blending, I think, of the old style Star Trek, where it's mission of the week, it's an away mission, that kind of thing, and the more serialized storytelling that we're used to in this day and age. Nice blending of the two, because it threads in those elements of the story arc, the Red Angel and stuff, but it packages it in a very in what is very much a kind of standalone episode by itself as well, that you could easily watch as just a one adventure and not be like, I don't know what's going on at all here because I don't know what happened in this episode and that episode. You could watch this episode and totally get what's going on for most of it. So yeah, that's all why it's my favourite episode of the season. So that's my list. What's yours? Let me know in the comments below. What's your least favourite episode? You can give me your whole list if you want to, or you could just tell me what your least favourite and what your best favourite, your favourite is. Your favourite is. Let me know in the comments below, and I will be back for more Star Trek videos at some point. I muted the idea that I might do some look back reviews about some of the old classic series, not in a kind of like I'm going to do every episode that way, but I think I might do some TNG reviews at some point. So do subscribe, like, share for all of that, and for other geeky pop culture things like Doctor Who, the MCU, comic books, and all sorts of things like that from me. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.